What's up? What's up? Welcome back for another episode of The Assist. I am your host, Dylan. Here at The Assist, we desire to bring you closer to all things happening within the New Orleans Pelicans, as well as occasionally the Baton Rouge Zydeco, because you know your guy has a diverse sports palette. Theodore, how you feeling, brother? You living good? You blessed? You look good. My man Theodore is ready to rock. We got another special guest today. The special guests just keep coming through the spot. And this man, what's understood doesn't have to be explained. One of one. But before I bring him up, I need to make sure you know that the Assist is a part of the No Network. We desire to bring the casual fans closer to all sports happening within the Gulf Coast. If you're an LSU Tiger fan, hold that Tiger like your boy. You're welcome home. If you're a Saints fan, championship hashtag loading. Welcome home. Any sports happening within the Gulf Coast area, this is your one-stop shop for it all. Congratulations. You're now rocking with the best, where if you don't know, now you know. If you don't know, now you know. Coming to the stage is none other than a legend in his own right. Locked On Pelicans host, credential media member, so many other titles, none other than my brother, my main man. We have such a checkered past. My main man, Jake Madison. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be on talking hoopsie. There's no checkered past. We're just happy, man. Like, basketball season's around the corner. We got fun stuff to talk about. I'm always excited to do this here.
Oh man, you're amazing, dude. Jake won't say it's a checker pass, but I will, because when you navigate through this sphere for the short amount of time I have and the long amount of time he has, you find a lot of people who they have tough conversations and then they run away from people. Jake is not that person. He's about developing the following of the Pelicans first, and he is one of the lead people standing in the front lines, carrying this content, carrying this sport, carrying this team forward. So thank you so much again, brother, for being such a grace-filled content creator, man. Grateful for it.
No, look, I appreciate you having me on. I'm excited here, my man.
Let's go. So we're gonna get into it. We know what time it is. Training camp is on the way. If we post this late enough, it's already going. What in your mind has you most excited about the New Orleans Pelicans this year? What are you hyped to see?
There's a number of things, right? Like, I don't think there's a shortage of things to be excited about with this team. Like, don't forget, this team won 49 games last year. Now, the season might have ended in a disappointing fashion, whether that's just going through the play-in tournament to get to the playoffs or getting swept in the first round. But 49 wins is a pretty significant accomplishment. And to me, I look at last season as a disappointment because this team didn't come close to reaching their full potential, in my opinion. And if they do that this year, 55 wins, I don't think is necessarily like out of the realm of possibility with it. And when you look at what they did in the offseason, they added one of the pieces they needed, which was a point guard. I think that became very apparent the past year, maybe the past year and a half, that they just needed someone to kind of run their offense. And they traded for DeJounte Murray, got him on a pretty good deal, and he seems to have answered at least one of like the big questions we had of the team of like, who's going to play point, who's going to be the table setter offensively, and it looks like it's going to be him, and he fits right in with what this team wants to do both offensively and defensively. So while the other area they needed to improve is the center position, you at least got one out of two, and that's a start to what they want to try and do here. And I think Murray is going to be a really, really good fit. And then the other thing that gets me really excited about this is Zion looks great this offseason. Now,
Talk about it.
We do this every year, right? We do this every year. You know, we're all in the support group together. We all have the matching t-shirts of we do this every year when it comes to Zion Williamson. But you've seen the steady progression of him over the past maybe 2 seasons as he's just becoming the professional you want him to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's where he hasn't done all of that for his career yet, but he's starting to get there. You know, after that in-season tournament loss to the Lakers last season, he started doing 2-a-days just himself to get in better shape. He started defending at a higher level because he was playing so much with Herb Jones. He's like, Herb's going to do that. I've got to do that. He's steadily just kind of like adding to the toolkit that he has. And now the picture's coming out of him. He looks better than he ever has before. And look, as long as you're looking better than you were a year ago, it shows improvement. He's going to be in game shape, it seems like, we hope, on game 1. his season, in my opinion, didn't start until after that in-season tournament loss. It didn't start till mid-December, January, even though he was playing games in good before that, but he reached a new level once he committed himself. If you can come into the opening game of the regular season and be where you were in January, that's going to help the Pelicans get off to a better start, win more games. And I think that's really important. And this team is going to go as far as Zion takes them. And right now, again, we've all been here, so you're welcome to be skeptical about this. We've all been here before, but signs are looking good at the very least.
Yes, dear God, we've seen what you've done for others. We saw what happened in Philadelphia. They waited a long time for the process to come to fruition. We've seen to a lesser extent what happened in Philadelphia also with Ben Simmons. We won't talk about Brooklyn. We won't talk about his final stint in Philly. But we saw the beginning, God. And we believe. We believe. Did you see the picture with him and Baton Rouge Southern University legend Avery Johnson at the Dallas Cowboys game? What do you think? So the goal, according to his father-in-law, is to come into camp at 171 pounds. I mean, 200. No, yeah, 107.
Oh, with
271.
271, yeah.
271. If he came at 171, we'd have problems.
Yeah,
We'd
like
probably need to
it's,
call
it's
someone.
less than what I weigh. So like, no,
Right,
like
right.
absolutely not. Don't
No,
do
don't do
that.
that. Don't do that at all. So he's supposed to be coming into camp at 271. In high school, he was at his lowest 284. Talk to me on what you perceive and believe a 271-pound Zion Williamson can accomplish at this level.
Yeah, I think when you look at just talk about his body, which one is always a little bit weird to do. You don't want him to be too light. That's why we were saying, like, don't get to 170. Like, that's not good for someone of that stature. Part of what makes him so successful is his strength and his kind of fast twitch muscles, which, look, more of those means you can kind of do those herky-jerky movements a whole lot quicker. When it comes to the weight, the big conversation about him is the conditioning and then just the longevity over the course of the season. When you jump with the kind of force that he does and when you land on the court, that takes a toll on you. Like, that puts wear and tear on your body. The more you weigh, the more wear and tear there is. So being a little bit lighter keeps him in just better form, better shape, prevents injury. And that's what this comes down to. That playoff series against OKC, I'm not saying the Pelicans would have won, but it would have been different with Zion Williamson in there. That might have
Exactly.
changed Brandon Ingram's trajectory this offseason, to be truthful here. So you just want Zion to play as many games and finally get a postseason appearance and a
Yes.
postseason game under him, and he hasn't been able to do that just yet. And you've got to wonder, as those hamstrings happen or other injuries happen, does that come at the cost of like pushing himself to fight to get into game shape over the course of the season? So if you can come into the season at that weight, it does help you over the course of the year, play as many games as possible, and hopefully play in the postseason. So when he's coming in lighter, you just hope it reduces some of the wear and tear on him. Go back a couple of years ago to that Phoenix Suns first round series, and Zion wanted to play. They weren't going to clear him to play. He was never going to play in that series, but he wanted to play. And he posted that video of that like 360 dunk that he did.
Yeah.
And when he landed on the ground, you can see this because it led to some like conspiracy theories and things like that. Like the court bows and bends significantly with that force that he lands on. And practice courts have that built into them to actually help prevent injuries. But when that court drops 2-3 inches when he lands, right? Imagine on a court that doesn't have that kind of give. It's going to put tear on your body there.
Yeah.
But try and avoid some of that. That's the big thing without losing who you are as a player too. Like, you don't want him to not be Zion Williamson and have some force behind the way he plays too. So it's a balancing act, I think.
Yeah, I think also you're speaking from the injury and the medical standpoint, from the performance standpoint, to be able to go from a 4.6 to a 4.5, 4.3 in your 40 time. I mean, we saw him outrun point guards. To be able to lose that amount of weight, it only adds to your athleticism. I mean, could we see head on the rim Zion again? Could we see Zion that's not just outrunning point guards, but outrunning some of the fastest point guards in the league? And I saw this tweet, and I want to ask you this. They were like, oh, this is so exciting that he's losing all this weight. Is he still going to be Zion without this weight? Is he still going to be the burly, you want to get out of his way because it's a freight train coming down the lane, Zion, or do you think he'll be a different iteration of Zion?
No, he's going to still be him, right? Like there's a way that he plays, and that's what he should lean into. That's why when I see people say like he should take threes or he should take more mid-range jumpers, he might want to have that in his bag a little bit. But what makes him special is who he is and the way that he plays, and you don't want to minimize that. If he starts shooting a ton of threes, he just becomes a normal NBA player, and he doesn't become a guy that's borderline all NBA, doesn't become an all-star. You want to lean onto the talents that you have and maximize those and make the most of those. So Zion being a little bit lighter, and it's not a ton lighter, 10, 15 pounds is helpful, but I don't think that's going to completely change anything. And put it this way, I don't think you or I want to be there trying to defend him when he's coming full speed at you at any weight, right? Like 300, 270. I'm good. I don't need to be in the way of that, right? And I'm sure a lot of NBA players are going to, think the same way about it. And when you look at how he plays, he doesn't just necessarily muscle guys out of the way. There's certainly some of that when he goes up against the Rudy Goberts and he plows into him, and you see Rudy Gobert, arguably the best defender, rim protector in the league, fly backwards
To the
right? That
first
is a
row.
Zion thing. But his finishing around the rim, the touch that he has with the way he can use his body, with the way he uses the glass to put shots up and in, is pretty special. And that's not a strength thing. That's a finesse thing. That's a talent thing. When he plays and finishes at the rim, he's more like a guard than a traditional big man, or, he's closer to a wing. And that's what makes him so special, that he plays like that, but in a big man's body. And that's the type of thing that makes Zion Williamson. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
100% agree with everything you said. I'm excited to see what Zion looks like by the third preseason game. I cannot wait to see, because we're getting to see a different iteration of Zion coming into camp and going in the preseason. But to move on in our conversation around the Pelicans, we're going to talk about Brandon Ingram later, because I'm sure that's a
I don't
conversation
think
in
we can
itself.
avoid that.
Yeah, I'm trying to. What within the Pels roster? Is there a certain individual that you have extremely high expectations for this coming year outside of Zion?
Yeah, I actually did my show on this the other day of like who has like the most pressure on them to like step up and perform. I don't even think Zion has that much pressure on him, to be perfectly
I
honest
agree.
with you, right? Like he kind of proved a lot last year. He's on a long-term contract. It's not like he's playing for money or anything. It's very different circumstances than like Ingram. When you look at guys that aren't the obvious names with it, I think there's two maybe that really jump out. And I think first and foremost is Trey Murphy the third. This is someone that I think the team would like to start to try and find a way to get him into the starting lineup. This is someone that's projected to maybe have a bit of a breakout season. His shooting is really good. One of the things to look at too with him, when you look at two-man lineup combinations, just with Zion Williamson and like Zion and one other player, the top guy that he has in terms of net rating is him and Trey. So there's clearly something special between those two. And it's obvious. It's the shooting from Trey Murphy, the size of Trey Murphy. If he really develops and takes a really big leap forward, does it make it easier to trade Brandon Ingram for less than what you want? In a sense, kind of trading Brandon Ingram for parts, spare pieces, something like that. And maybe it does, because you have the replacement ready to go in Trey Murphy. If they want to try and play small, they're going to need additional size out there on the court. Trey at 6'9", 6'10", who improved his defensive rebounding as last season went on, is really a key to a lot of that. And if he can improve on the defensive side of the ball, where I think that's maybe one of the weaker aspects of his game, even though he has the tools for it, what does that unlock for this team in terms of lineup combinations? So I do think there's kind of a lot of pressure, high expectations for Trey Murphy, whether that's fair or unfair, because we're kind of setting these for, the expectations, but I do think that exists. Another guy on the team that I think is kind of one of those like off the radar names is Carlo Makovich. I don't love
Talk
the
about it.
idea.
Let's park here for a second.
Yeah.
I want to give you the floor. I, Jake, I'm going to be honest. I was skeptical when we first brought him in. What I saw from this past summer league, I know it's just summer league. It's a glorified pickup game. But talk to me. Talk me off of the Carlo Mania train, because right now I got first class tickets. I'm not even in economy right now. I'm first class, doing what I want, toes out. on the Carlo train.
Oh,
Talk
you
to
got
me.
your shoes off on the plane here,
It's
man?
diabolical. It's
That's how in
diabolical.
on you are. Um, you know, I have expectations on him, and I do think these are unfair expectations because he hasn't proven it in the NBA, and I am somewhat skeptical, as you said. Summer League, like I just don't read much into it. When you look at who they're playing against, like most of those guys won't even be in the G League next season.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
people they bring in on Summer League are literally like PE teachers that maybe played at a D3 school. And it's like, hey, you want to come to Vegas for 2 weeks, get free meals and play some games because we need bodies. And they do that. And so, yeah, you're
That's
not even
something I
playing.
thought I'd never hear from Jake Madison. PE teach that
It's
that was
truthful, man.
something I never thought I
It's
would hear you say. But keep going. I'm
not
sorry.
always, but you get some of those guys that are literally just like you need someone who can breathe air and be on a court, and here's a hotel room and a couple of free meals, and these guys are like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm not doing anything else. Yeah,
I love
bodying up those guys, dunking over those guys, like doesn't mean much.
it.
That said, there's reasons to get excited about him. As you said, he looked like he belonged. And this isn't just like a rookie. This is someone who does have professional experience overseas. And sometimes part of just acclimating to the NBA is taking care of your body,
Yeah.
making sure you're at practices on time. And what extra work do I need to do? Just how do you be a professional? Being on the road, away from your family, traveling, like that can take a toll on you. And he's got a lot of that kind of off court stuff under his belt already. And I think that can go a really long way with someone like him. He moved like an NBA player, right? He operated in the pick and roll and, just did the kind of stuff you want. And so I have big expectations on him because they just really need him to develop.
Yeah.
This is more out of necessity than I think he will be good. This is me kind of like hoping and praying. I don't love Daniel Tice as a starter. I think Tice is serviceable, but this is someone that was going to be in Europe next season. You could argue that he's maybe, and this isn't like a direct shot or anything at him. You'd argue that Tice is one of the worst starters in the NBA right now. If he was going to be out of the league and the only team that was going to sign him was the Pelicans and now he's starting, you could argue he's maybe one of the worst players in the NBA right now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have almost been in Europe.
Right.
So there's that. And he doesn't give a ton offensively. He's not a 3-point threat. He's not a pick and roll guy. Yeah, he sets good screens, but if he's setting a screen for Zion, they're just going to go under the screen and leave Tice wide open and double Zion. So, if you set good screens, what does it do if it doesn't kind of do anything to the defense? Carlo, when you look at the players on the roster in terms of big men, is a pick and roll big. He operated really well, I thought, in the short roll from like the free throw line to the basket during Summer League. If he can kind of be a lob threat, a pick and roll threat while hitting a couple of threes and he'll get wide open looks from three, like that's the type of game changer X factor for the Pelicans offensively. With Daniel Tice, are they playing 4-on-5 offensively, four guys because no one is going to defend Tice? That hurts you. But if you can at least make the center position an offensive threat, you're playing 5-on-5. And I think that goes a long way. So they need one of these big men to really step up, whether that's Carlo Makovich, whether it's Trey Jemison, or, the first round pick in Yves Missi. Those are the type of guys that you're looking for that they like desperately need one of them to really be a factor this season. Carlo, to me, of the three names we just said, I think is more likely to be the one that kind of finds a spot in the rotation. So I'm putting some big expectations on him because like they desperately need it, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of the things that's kind of a lost art in the NBA, Jake, is the ability to fill lanes. Now, we obsess over rim running bigs, rightfully so. Derek Lively is a rim running big, which is a straight line big. Tyson Chandler, rim running straight line big. Carlo is different. Carlo has the ability to fill a lane and curve into that rim running role, which I think a lot of us think is just elementary basketball. But when you've been in the league so long at such a high level, mine is obviously not in the NBA, but in Euro League and so on, and you've been dominating in a certain facet, your brain thinks, let me just run straight down the lane. No one's going to stop me, and no one can. We saw that with Jackson Hayes until he started to experiment with trying to shoot threes. I digress right there. I'm going to get off that train and get back on the correct one. But with watching Carlo in Summer League, he gave me something that I think would benefit Zion even more, because Zion, when he's on the fast break, he's not slowing down like Luka. When you got a Derek Lively, he's perfect with Luka. because Luka's going to slow down around that 3 point line, and Derek Lively can run right towards the rim dive, and you got that alley because everyone is shifted towards Luka, alley on the backside. That's not Zion. With Zion, everyone is running straight to the paint. So when you have a post player that knows how to play the angles and knows how to pull a guy out and backdoor alley oops, I feel like he's going to be an amazing threat. I think that's something that we aren't really talking about at the level we should when it comes to Carlo, because Yves Messi, and sorry if I messed up your name, I'm going to learn it as the season goes, brother. But as he goes, he's a rim running big, just 70% at the rim, going to kill you, going straight down the lane. But he needs to learn the angles of the game still. And you spoke a little bit about Daniel Theus. I I mean, maybe I'm off, but I think when I saw him play, was it in Boston? Where was he at before Boston? Was it New York?
He was in Boston. That was his longest stint. He was what, in Cleveland a little bit too. I
Yeah,
think I'm
I
trying to
can't
remember
remember.
some of the
I
other
thought he was in New
stops that
York
he's
or
had. But Boston's where he was like the most. Sorry,
longest.
Chicago, Houston a little bit, Boston again, and then Indiana
Okay,
and the
so
Clippers.
his
Yeah.
first iteration in Boston, we saw him shoot threes at a 36% clip or something like that. 30, it was pretty 36, 37, and I may be off a couple, but he I think he might not be Jonas like in stretching the floor. Now, not this past season Jonas, but the previous season Jonas. But I mean, I think when you are brought into a situation where you know that Zion is the primary guy and you know the way he plays, it almost adds new life to your game, wouldn't you think? Because you know, on offense, I'm giving space. I'm not diving. I'm giving space. Do you think that, or you think he is who he is?
I think he's gonna probably shoot more threes than he has before, but it's not like, he's undersized. He plays bigger than he is, but he's 6'8", and look, that dude is tough. Like you could argue he might be the toughest guy on this team. And when you look at what he's going to do, he's not gonna be used in a pick and roll. He's not gonna be a post up threat. Like, where does he fit in offensively for what this team needs? Especially when you factor in what the predicted starting lineup is going to be, which is probably going to be DeJounte Murray, Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones, Zion Williamson, and Daniel Tice. Where does Tice fit in? What's his role there? And that's one of the things that I kind of struggle with. He can shoot the three, but I wouldn't say he's good at it. For his career, he's a 33% shooter from three. His numbers in 5 seasons in Boston is 30, let me find it here, 34.6% from three. Like, it's not a bad number, and he'll get wide open looks here. But I think it's one of those things where with that starting lineup, let's say, if Daniel Tice is shooting threes, the opponent's going to be like, heck yeah, right? Like, let him bomb away, because it means Zion's not drawing and ones, Ingram's not doing his thing, Murray's not doing his things, and then that means Herb Jones isn't. Herb might be the best shooter of that group in a sense.
Yeah.
He's not shooting from the corners. Teams want Daniel Tice taking that, and they're
Yeah.
going to give him that shot. And if you're the Pelicans, you've got to find a way to not play into the defense's hands with that and kind of force your game on them. I struggle a little bit with figuring out how they're going to do that with Tice, but think we'll kind of see more of that, as we get through preseason. My big concern with that is something that really became apparent last year, and that's the starters didn't win their minutes. The Pelicans won the majority of their games because their bench unit just dominated other teams' benches, and that's great in the regular season. Great in the regular season. But when you shorten your rotation in the postseason and bench guys aren't playing, or teams aren't playing their ninth guy, their 10th guy, some teams play 7 men, 6 guys in a postseason rotation. You don't have the opportunity to beat up on end of bench guys and win those games. Your starters need to do it. And the Pelicans starters were a net negative last year. That group that we just said, that doesn't scream to me a unit that's going to like blow out other starters and really win their minutes. And that's a big concern for me. And that's partially because of the center position there just doesn't make a ton of sense. So we got to hope that Carlo or someone can kind of come along and develop into that guy that unlocks that unit a little bit. Or you just go with an entirely different starting unit. That could be the case too.
Yeah. I mean, hey, Griff, I know you have people everywhere. I just saw that Nick Richards is available. Now, obviously, it takes assets to get an asset. I just saw that he's available if you want to turn the wheels there, which I don't know what that would look like. I think the Walker Kessler ship has sailed. I don't know why, and maybe you could speak to that, Jake. But I think that ship is sailed. So, um, but you said something and you snuck it in. I want to pause here. When you mentioned your starting five, there was a name absent from that starting five. Guy by the name of Christian James McCullum. Talk to me. I love it. Full disclosure, I love it. What's this? I like it. I love it. I want more. That's. I'm with you. But talk me into what you think he will bring to the bench mob. Talk to me on how do you get him to commit to said bench mob when he's been a starter basically his entire career, except what year one or two.
Yeah, I think when you look at CJ McCollum here, there's no real worry about him trying to get him to trying accepting a role. Like he's just going to do it. Like that dude is a pro and he's making so much money. I don't think he's truthfully worried about it, right? Like whenever he's been asked about like, well, you've never made an all-star game, his response is, I'm paid like one, and he's cool with that, right? You know what? It's like, do you have a problem not being a starter? And his response is going to be like, well, I'm paid like one, so I don't particularly care, I think. And so we're expecting him to come off the bench. And I think he's the type of guy that honestly could be in the running for sixth man of the year. I just looked at this on my show too, right? Sixth man of the year, when you look at this like role, the award winners historically, it's honestly like a good offensive player who's not good defensively that can about score 20 points per game. Like that's what it is, right? It's usually a guard that just can score, is a defensive liability, so you can't start him. That's truthfully what it is. CJ fits that. CJ
Perfect.
fits that. And when you look at the role he will play, coming off the bench, I don't think he'll necessarily get 20 points per game, but somewhere 16 to 18 points, I think is realistic. That should be good enough. He's going to come in, he's going to get 16 to 18 points. He's going to get about 4 rebounds, 4 or 5 assists per game. And he'll do that coming off the bench. And I think that's going to put him in the running for sixth man of the year, assuming that there aren't just injuries to the starting unit and then he's pressed into starting and doesn't qualify. That's going to be his role. I think you're going to want them to keep, Zion, Ingram, Trey a little bit more together, and they'll look to do that. And I think that kind of leaves the odd man out of CJ. So you'll see some bench units where he's kind of the anchor on that. And you saw some of it last year. They ran some kind of units and lineups that were anchored by CJ and Jonas Valanciunas with like a defender and 2 other shooters out there. And those lineups had a lot of success. There was a lot of spacing. CJ could get into the lane, attack, and score in the pick and roll with Jonas, or just bomb away from 3 or kick out to guys to shoot from 3. I think you'll see lineups like that too. And so I think he'll find a lot of success in that role. My question when it comes to CJ, and I don't have an answer for this, I'm curious what you think, is will he close games? We talk a lot about the starting lineup, and players have egos and they want to start. But what we view in the media and fans is who closes a game. That's more important. You've got a close game, 5 minutes left, within 5 points. Who's your unit out there that you put out to win the game? Is CJ in that group? And
I
I'm not
think
sure.
I think personally, him being in that group has to be situational, because I've gone on record of saying CJ is a fourth quarter merchant. In the fourth quarter, he either is going to kill you or he's going to win you the game. There is no in between with CJ, and if he's playing in the rhythm of the game and he looks like he's fitting in more than shot hunting, and he's playing off of Zion and Brandon and DeJounte, then I think you can afford to alleviate Herb Jones of fourth quarter minutes from time to time. But I think it should be the micro and not the macro. I just don't trust CJ enough in fourth quarters. And I know as I said, he has the ability to keep you in games and win you games sometimes, but it's extreme to extreme. And so for my money, I think you brought in DeJounte Murray specifically for that fourth quarter. And to have him off the floor, you're actually wasting your investment, because that's what you brought him in for. You're not going to take Herb off the floor because you want him in the fourth quarter because the other team is going to have their best scorer in the fourth quarter. Last time I've checked, I've never seen a first team all defensive guy on the bench in the fourth quarter. I mean, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think I've seen it unless they're in foul trouble, Draymond, things like that. But you don't see him go to the bench in the fourth quarter when it's winning time. Now you could argue the Trey Murphy situation, but I think Trey Murphy being in the game in the fourth quarter is almost at a point where it's a non-negotiable because the floor shrinks in the fourth quarter. And if you have Zion in and the floor is shrinking, you're going to need those spacers in the corners and in the stretch three zone so that you can keep the defense honest and leave those lanes open for Zion to attack, facilitate, dominate, or whatever it looks like. So if there was a person, and this is going to be, we got to talk about him, Jake. We can't dodge it. If there was a person that you would sub out to bring CJ in the fourth, it's Brandon Ingram. I mean, obviously we have the center situation, but we've kind of all collaboratively said Zion is going to be the game closing center majority of the time, unless something crazy happens, like you're playing against Wemby and you want a 6'10" Carlo out there. But I mean, for the most part, Zion is going to be your closing center, and that brings me to my thoughts on Brandon Ingram. And we're gonna wrap this bad boy up here. Obviously, we're not. We can't leave without talking about it. I don't want to talk about it, but it is what it is. Do you think Brandon Ingram is prepared to see a decrease in minutes in situations like he saw in the playoffs this past year? Do you think he's ready for that, or do you think that's something he even needs to worry about? Or are you like, nah, he's on the floor in the fourth, CJ sit on the bench?
I'm not sure. At the end of the season, when we spoke to him at the end of season media availability, like you could tell that playoff series was weighing on him and the lack of success that he had. And I thought that might lead to some introspection. One of those moments where it's like, I got to look in the mirror here. And then the way this summer went with him, look, clearly the NBA was like, every team was like, yeah, we're not going to pay you. Like, we don't value you the way that you think. And that's a pretty sobering moment and maybe hard to take in. But when everyone is screaming that at you and everyone was yelling it, right? Otherwise, he would have been traded by now. It's as simple as that. You would hope that that would kind of get through to him, because if he doesn't change, when you look at the offseason next year and there's no salary cap space, free agency doesn't happen like it used to when teams are like, oh, we need expiring salary because then we'll go sign all these awesome big names in free agency. No one switches teams like that anymore. It's extending trades and signing trades before they become free agents. Almost anyone who would be a big name free agent next offseason signed an extension with their current team. So that's not how it goes anymore. There's maybe like 2-3 teams with cap space. If Brandon Ingram doesn't change, this is how he ends up on a $12 million a year mid-level exception deal that's down from the 36 that he's taking right now, because where's he going to get that money otherwise? And that's kind of what he's looking at in the face. So you would think his representation, you would think this is something that would have just kind of been hammered home, where he's like, you know what, going into next season, I'm going to have to take more threes. I'm going to have to sacrifice and do all of those things. I think his defense was fine enough last year, and I've heard people say that, but I do think he stepped up on that side of the ball. But obviously, something has to change at this point. And so going into this year, I would have been like, yeah, he's ready for this, because the reality of the situation is you better be.
Yeah.
And then he didn't show up to the offseason workouts. Then he posted that Instagram thing of like, go where you're valued and all. That's the type of stuff that worries me. And that kind of changes my thinking. And I don't want to read too much into social media posts and things like that. But very clearly, he's frustrated with this situation, and I get it. It sucks. He's kind of the first test case of this new second apron and the new collective bargaining agreement. But right now, I'm not optimistic that he's going to do the things he needs to do to help this team win based off of those social media posts. If he had shown up to the workouts, if he didn't post that, we would be talking differently. Media day is around the corner. We'll get a little bit more insight to that maybe and what he's thinking there. But it is going to require a big change from him. And that's it's not just the $1 million question around the Pelicans. It's like the $100 million, $208 million question around the Pelicans right now, because he's clearly not going to get the money that he wants. I think most teams around the league no one views him as a number one. I don't think that many teams probably view him as a number two. You're kind of like a really good third guy on a team. And that's not easy to swallow. Right. Egos and that stuff is very real in the NBA. And we're going to find out how Brandon Ingram adjusts, because he's going to need to. They obviously are going to start him. and this
Yep.
kind of answers your original question here. I went on a long little thing there.
I love it.
They're obviously going to start him, but you don't have to close games with him. At this point, there's too much talent on the roster, and you can craft some pretty good closing fives, and it doesn't have to include Brandon Ingram. And in that game against the Lakers, final game of the regular season, when the Pelicans were down double digits, he was on the bench, and Zion was leading the comeback till the injury, and it all fell apart. But that showed that, yeah, you can bench him. Now, he's coming back from injury, and that game wasn't fully himself. Certainly, that's part of it. But you have to start him. You don't have to close games with him. And that's where we're going to kind of see the rubber to meet the road, to use a cliche with all of this.
What do you think is the best case scenario with the Brandon Ingram ending, or how does this saga end in the best case in your head?
So there's, in my opinion, there's one path to him getting paid. There's one path to him getting paid, and that's actually fit in on this team and sacrifice the numbers and shoot more threes and be more of a complementary player around Zion Williamson and DeJounte Murray. He's more valuable to the Pelicans than he is to any other team. If this team wins 50 games and they avoid the play-in tournament, and maybe they win a first-round series, you think this team is going to just let him walk for nothing? You think this team is just going to trade him away for parts? Absolutely not. They're not going to throw away one of the best. At that point, we could call it the best season in franchise history, let's say. They're going to overpay you. It might not be the $208 million max extension that he then wants, but they're going to pay you more, because if he walks, it's a terrible look for the team if they just had a very, very successful season. This applies to Willie Green, too, in a sense. So if he fits in and helps this team win on a level that he hasn't done before, he's going to get paid. He's going to get paid by this Pelicans team. It might be $185 million. It might be $190 million. That's closer to the 208 and certainly better than the $12 million a year that he'd be looking at in free agency as a mid-level exception. His path to getting paid is sacrifice, be a complimentary player, get slightly overpaid as a complimentary player, which is good money in the NBA right now. This team wins, and then you're here long term.
I feel like you just made every single Brandon Ingram stand throw up. I can just see
Probably,
the tweets.
but it's the reality of it.
Yeah, I agree, but I can see the tweets right now. They just love Zion. They don't bring him back to California. Listen, we want to see Brandon Ingram win. For all of you who have this crazy thought in your head that we are unappreciative of Brandon Xavier Ingram, that's a lie. But it's also a business, guys. And at the end of the day, we hate to talk about it like this because they are living, breathing human beings. But to the Pelicans, they are also added assets that you are to do well with. That's just the truth. All right. So now that we're done with that, I'm going to close up with this because I was not going to talk there long. I told you. I'm exhausted. I'm going to give you the floor. I'm going to solo you. I want to know, what in your head does the end of the season look like for the Pelicans? Are they a 50 plus? If you want to put an exact number on it, you can. 50 something with the second round exit or finals, whatever you want to call it. That's your first question. And the second question is, what is your hot take about the Pelicans for the 2024-2025 season?
So, oh boy. Okay. I'm like solo on the screen here. Okay. So let's go. I think they finish as the 6th seed. The West is brutally tough. I don't want to put a win total on that because these teams are going to be beating themselves up a lot. And while 49 wins wasn't enough to get out of the play-in tournament last year, I think it could be different this year with how competitive the West is when you look at like 2, maybe just 3 teams like really not going for it and trying to improve their rosters. But I think there's enough talent here, and I think they'll realize early on they need to go with some unconventional lineups and find what gives them success, that they avoid the play-in tournament, but I don't see them as a top 4 seed in the Western Conference unless health goes crazy with some other teams. And then for the hot take on this is the one I've been saying for a little bit here. I really can see a world where CJ McCollum gets traded this season. Not Brandon Ingram, but CJ McCollum gets traded. We talked about him as a potential sixth man of the year off the bench. But for a team that's in some financial difficulties in terms of the luxury tax, they're hard capped at the first apron to get into the nitty gritty of the collective bargaining agreement. It might be easier to trade CJ McCollum for $33 million and not pay that to be your sixth man off the bench. You can elevate Trey Murphy a little bit into more of that role too. It seems to make some sense that you could maybe look to move on from him that way. It maybe then gives you a reason to pay Brandon Ingram for more continuity. That could solve, not saying it will, but could solve a lot of things. And I could really see that happening. So my hot take is CJ will get traded.
Holy smokes. That poof. Just oh, I did not expect that. You got me good. I've heard a lot of things this summer. That's one I have not heard it. And with you saying it, you're gonna keep me up at night because now I'm wondering what is going on.
Well, we'll find out, man. Look, it's going to be an interesting year. Like, there's going to be a lot of storylines, a lot going on. There's going to be moving pieces and everything. We'll see how they end up.
Oh, man. Well, Jake, thank you so much for dropping in with us. Tell the people where they can find all of your content.
Yeah, look, just search Locked On Pelicans, like literally anywhere you will find it's on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm on Twitter. It's at Nola Jake. Yeah, just search Locked On Pelicans. It's there Monday through Friday for y'all.
Thank you so much for dropping in, brother. Appreciate you once again for it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Dylan.
Thank y'all once again for watching another episode of The Assist. We are so grateful for you. Keep tuning in. Keep locked in. The best is yet to come. If you don't know, now you know.